first off, Ed, thank you so much for coming on with us. You really don't need any introduction. You're an award-winning actor, director, hundreds of films, you name it, with all the greats out there. Former head of the Screen Actors Guild, I think one of the longest serving. The star of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, your own Lou Grant Show. And, of course, that got politically attacked. We should probably talk about that censorship. All of this going on, and you join us now here today. But out of the gates, days after you came on about false flags, Ed, then it actually started coming out in the news where they're openly talking about a pretext with Iran or trying to prod them into something. I mean, why do you think they're so brazen now, sir?
I think they create a witch's brew, and they got to keep stirring it. And they certainly will keep looking for new ways to create the false flag, so that as much as the public may get alerted to the idea of false flag, trying to make it as convincing as possible will be the only way that they can sell this new witch's brew. You know, a new improved formula, let's call it. And by talking about false flag, now making it common parlance, we are all on our toes and ready to receive these rumors, and we get all excited. And they accomplish their mission by keeping us off balance, even if they don't do it, so that we are ready for any provocation, and we're jittery over any provocation. And if the provocation doesn't come, then we can pat ourselves on the back by saying, well, we stopped it. But they'll come up with, I mean, one good example. If for some reason they found a way for Israel to trigger an action against Iran, and they have to be careful in responding to that action, the Iranians, that is. So if they respond within a limited way, then it'll be a limited war. But, of course, if they go beyond that and attack some of the U.S. boats in the Gulf of Hormuz, the Straits of Hormuz, then it can easily expand. And, of course, that's why we talk about false flag operations, the danger of it somehow becoming more magnified than it was originally planned to be. Now, if Israel and Iran strictly restrict their actions against each other, and it doesn't go widespread from that, then everything's okay. We're still not responsible for Israel, supposedly. But what happens if it expands, if there's a mistake, and we get involved? What's this, more American troops pouring into the Middle East?
Well, undoubtedly, I have family in the military. I have a lot of sources, and since I reported on this a year ago, now it's an open secret that they're massing U.S. troops in and around Iran, in and around Syria. They're using al-Qaeda proxy groups to attack Libya and now Syria. And I'm not a fan of Gaddafi. I'm not a fan of Assad. But compared to what they're putting in, bringing in the Arab fighters out of Saudi Arabia, exterminating blacks, genocide, black Africans, that's now admitted. And the witch's brew is destabilization. That's the goal. And they're now the admitted al-Qaeda groups are on record saying once they've taken over Syria, they're going to purge and pogrom the Christians and Jews that have been there for thousands and thousands of years. Christians for 2,000, Jews for over 3,000 in Syria. This is all being announced, and Hillary's in the BBC today. We have an article at Infowars.com, Ed. Hillary Clinton admits U.S. and al-Qaeda on same side as Syria. U.S. and France arm rebels with anti-aircraft missiles. In an interview with BBC, she said, quote, "We have a very dangerous set of actors in the region, al-Qaeda, Hamas, and those who are on our terrorist list, to be sure, claiming to support the opposition in Syria." So they're having the cake and eating it too, acting like they're not arming them. I mean, how do they say we should give up all our rights, Ed, and have checkpoints on highways and TSA groping us and all of this because of al-Qaeda? But then it's on record the U.S. government got the underwear bomber on the plane because Kurt Haskell, our listener, saw it happen, reported it, and then a month and a half later, the State Department had to admit in Congress they were ordered to get him on the plane. I mean, how obvious does this get, Ed?
Well, you strike up, I said, I'm like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. How can we speak of any conversation with Al-Qaeda? How can we in any way show any familiarity? You can say, well, the Taliban are a religious group within Afghanistan. You will try to maybe make a deal with them. But when Al-Qaeda, who is expressly opposed to anything we stand for and wish our destruction, and is credited with 9/11, supposedly, how can we even talk about talking to them? How does this take place? And we sit here numbly nodding our heads. Oh, so we're talking to Al-Qaeda. Well, since when? And who said it's okay?
It is the Twilight Zone. It is Alice in Wonderland. Believe me, I feel like I'm in Wonderland every day. I mean, here's Forbes today. The TSA is coming to a highway near you, and then it reports that they're setting up checkpoints from Dallas to Nashville, from New York to San Francisco, and now they pull you over without a warrant, and they don't just search your car, they try to grab on you. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, well, it's the exercise of mind control in the good old U.S. of A. I have no answers. I can only say, where are the people? What are the people saying about this? Where are their outspoken voices to challenge us, to bring it on the floor of that so-called Congress? What is going on? We nod our heads and say, oh, I see. And we accept. We cannot accept. We've got to protest, we've got to go on the streets. Of course, going in the streets didn't do much for Iraq, did it?
Well, that brings up the next point. Why don't we see more stars, more people like yourself who have the courage that you have, Ed? I mean, we don't really see that very often, and then even when somebody who supported Obama, like Matt Damon, says, man, Obama's keeping the wars going, the torture, you didn't do what you say you do, he gets attacked like he can't even have an opinion in America. Yeah.
I didn't know that he had outspokenly questioned Obama on that, but it's a striking point, isn't it? The reason that more don't is out of fear. I mean, the example I point to is Meryl Streep, who had never been outspoken on any subject that I know of, third Oscar now winner, when she chose to speak out against Alar, coating on apples, being unhealthy. And she was so slapped down at the time, Meryl Streep is never outspoken again. And that's why most of them don't speak. They don't want to hurt their box office.
Look at the Dixie Chicks. I happen to know they're listeners of my show here in Austin. I've talked to some of them. They come out and mildly criticize the war and say they don't like George Bush. They're Americans. They have First Amendment. They stopped playing their music on the radio for a full year. Now, they ended up being even more popular in the end, but they still now have shut up. And again, since when do they blacklist people in this country, Ed?
Well, that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. It takes on various shades, various colors, and it works in mysterious ways. But I use the Meryl Streep example as the most telling, and it's a lot of trouble to shoot your mouth off, because for the most part, most people don't want to hear it for two reasons. One, they don't want the myth of America being duplicitous accepted as fact. They don't want to. They want to think that Santa Claus still exists. They believe in the myth that America came into bloom without bloodshed, forgetting about the Indians, forgetting about the black slavery, all of the forgetting about all of the wars, which so many of them were generated by false flag operations, but which we have a very strong history of war in this country, whether they believe it or not. We are a militaristic country. And if we're not fighting using our troops themselves, we're certainly the greatest arms supplier in the world for everybody else who wants to start shooting.
Well, yeah, the United States, just the military of the U.S., in 2011 numbers just came out from the Congressional Budget Office, is 53% of all armament spending worldwide. 53% just our military is 53% of all spending worldwide out of 170-plus countries. But get this, it gets worse. Then, of arms sales worldwide, the United States is at least half of what's left. So we're talking about 70+%, Ed, of all armament spending and sales worldwide is the United States.
Now, ask your American citizen why. Why? He won't have an answer. That's to keep peace will be the answer. Keep peace. You need guns to keep peace is the answer. And God bless, what's his name? The low man on the totem pole.
Ron Paul?
Yeah. Who, what an earth-shaking event if his ideas could to take root, at least in some of the areas he proposed.
Yeah, well, since when is it revolutionary to not want to be an empire and to follow the Constitution? Since when is that such a great evil? And it's when we're naive, as you've pointed out, when we think America can do no wrong, that's what allows us to become this corrupt system instead of our greater angels, our better aspects. We sink into the mud when we just say, no, we're the good guys, that's the end of it. It's like a schizophrenic thing where we say we have the moral authority and other people are bad when they torture, but we're good when we torture. I mean, how did Bush, I want to ask you this, how did Bush send a bunch of people to prison who got caught torturing under orders in Afghanistan and Iraq, including contractors, and I'm not saying they don't deserve to go to jail, when he gave the order on record, and the White House memos are public, and then he wrote a book last year bragging that he ordered torture and would do it again. Now, wait a minute. What should that say to the minions? That they'll order you to torture, when you get caught, you'll go to jail, and then Bush says he gave the order publicly and doesn't get in trouble. I mean, that's la-la land, Ed.
I know it. And it's part of the mind control that we all exist under. The alternative sources of information are enormous, but how many people read them? How many people see them, hear them? And you're one of those few voices that challenges the authority of this country, and you should be a star blazoned on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, well, you're kind. All I want to do is, like I know you want, is not have World War III and have my children have a future. And I'm in this so deep, there's no pulling out now, but we're all in it together. Ed, you've talked a lot about history. You're an informed guy. We've seen this with Napoleon and Hitler and countless others. They always think they're invincible and go wild. And every historian, every top general, even the former head of the Mossad, they're all saying, 80+% of them, are saying the U.S. and Israel are crazy, don't start these wars, back off on Syria, back off on Iran, Russia and China. The Chinese president, I went and looked it up, Ed. In 60 years of the Chinese over there with the communists, they've never made statements like prepare for war with the U.S. A month ago, their president said in a speech, prepare for war with the U.S., they're moving troops in and around us, which is admitted. And if they attack Pakistan or anybody, we're going to have war with them. The Russians are saying that. And it's not even in our news, Ed. It's in the British, European news. But it's like when the Chinese, with thousands of high-tech nukes, are saying prepare for war, and U.S. ships are massing off their coast, and it's not even an issue, Ed. I mean, what do you think's going on here?
I think we're being dazzled and knocked off balance. And will continue to be so because, it all comes down to economics, doesn't it?
It does.
We get in liberal presidents who pass anti-tariff laws, who create fair trade laws. Those fair trade laws have now created much of the unemployment that now exists in our country. And I never thought I'd be saying this. When does this country begin to worry about its internal poverty? And we're slipping on every element. Okay, the unemployment figures go down, but it's still way too high for the richest country in the world to have that high level of unemployment. That's not right, and it's mostly due to the fact that the fair trade laws that were created are unemploying Americans.
Well, they're not fair. I mean, our country was built with tariffs, and it's not. They're not fair trade. You know, they claim they are, but I've looked at the agreements. They're all one-sided, and it's not even helping the Chinese and the Mexicans and the Indians with the jobs. I mean, they're having to compete to race to the bottom. I guess Ross Perot was right about that.
Look at the labels on your clothes, on your shoes, on your watches, anything you wear. Where does it come from? Not here. No tradesman is allowed to exist in this country anymore. I'm aghast, and I suppose if you think that there's a great power combine which is trying to create a balance in the world, I guess our children will suffer until that balance is achieved throughout the world. But while we're getting there, it's certainly causing us suffering.
Well, you know, sir, that's their cover. I've had globalists, you know, these big corporate fascists give me the speech of, yeah, we're setting this up. It's to balance things. But you read their internal documents that have been leaked. They want everybody in poverty because we're easier to control. They're not trying to lift anybody up.
Yeah. Well, they're doing a good job so far.
Yeah, they are.
They're doing a good job.
What about other Hollywood folks? I mean, you're one of the most well-connected people in Hollywood history, former head of the Screen Actors Guild, hundreds of films with every major star you can imagine. I mean, privately, when you talk to people, do they realize our peril? I mean, just a sense of where Hollywood is.
Well, on 9/11, I'm regarded as a nutcase. And at the same time, maybe I have special dispensation because I became regarded as a nutcase long ago when I was talking about Central America and our involvement there. So maybe they allow me to dangle out there to serve as a typical nutcase. And I'll gladly accept that, as long as I can keep getting some work. And that's always the important thing, to be able to pay the rent. I would say most of them just don't want to get into that added trouble, that added fatigue. We're fighting a battle now in our union. They're pushing very hard to, and they have an enormous majority behind them to merge the two actors' unions on television. And a small group of old diehard union members are trying to fight it with a suit to get an injunction to discount our election for merger between AFTRA and SAG.
Well, I'll tell you what, stay there. You're really an expert on this. We'll be right back with this breaking news on what's happening with some of the last unions in this country, a counterbalance to the corporate fascists. We'll be right back. Stay with us with Ed Asner. All right, Ed Asner, former head of the Screen Actors Guild, is our guest. And we were talking about the economy, and he was bringing up what we've seen some of in the news, how they're trying to change even the union system out in California, out in Hollywood. And again, I think some unions get out of control. They get politically controlled. They take the dues. They use it to get rid of NAFTA and GATT, which is the opposite of what the unions should want. But I do believe in a counterbalance. You know, we saw the Rockefellers and others, and Pinkerton Security riding down people, you know, shooting, folks that tried to unionize in the last 80, 90 years. So people fought for this. and it's certainly done some good. So it's a complex issue with the unions. I believe people also have the right to, quote, work if it's separate from within a system, but there needs to be some balance, and we're definitely out of balance. And the big New World Order globalists, they don't want it. So we couldn't have a better expert on about what's happening right now with the unions out there. Please continue, Ed, where we left off when we went to break.
Well, you know, I always question myself because I don't know enough, Alex, and I constantly found myself on my head trying to say I'm not qualified sufficiently to carry this banner alone. I ask too many questions, and I don't do enough research to give the answers. I do what I can. Here in film, we're faced with a huge consortium of power, which will create a merger with the AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and the Screen Actors Guild, of which I am a former president. We have worked for 70-some years in creating this strong union, and in the past few years, AFTRA, that used to negotiate with us conjointly for actors' contracts in film, has chosen to depart on its own and undercut us. They've done this with the power of the AFL-CIO, who would be happy to see a larger merged union, even though it's a weaker union, because they like numbers. They like the dues coming in from that increased number of actors. But here we have AFTRA, who has negotiated weaker contracts with producers. Producers are gladly accepting. Most shows now are on AFTRA. Formerly, they were all SAG. The 4As, which normally governed the policy between the two unions, has not done anything in terms of AFTRA taking over our jurisdiction, and the powers in SAG of late have not pursued their rightful course in demanding their protection of their authority, so that producers have signed with AFTRA, which gives on the surface more or less the same wages for first-time production, but their contracts are weaker in terms of residuals. Their contracts are weaker in terms of our pension and health. And what this band of brothers with me has done is to try to show to the membership, who are snowed by all of this authority that's coming down from all other areas, producers, agents, the power of New York, who has never been happy with the power of Hollywood actors, who control 53% of the actors in the business. They have snowed most of the membership out there, so that they are not aware that if this merger takes place without a feasibility study of what will happen to their pensions and to their health and welfare plans, that they will suffer, their dues will increase, they'll be in bed with broadcasters who work non-union, and they've created yet another witch's brew, which is symptomatic of our country, and which is symptomatic of the weakening of unions in this country. And if you don't believe in unionism, then there's no sense in listening to me, because unions are what stands for the working man, and the working man generally has been destroyed in this country by those Fair Trade Acts, by the resistance of isolationist senators and congressmen who create laws which create right-to-work states, which create strong enforcement on Taft-Hartley, so that people are boggled by the pressures working against them, and we end up the average working actor ends up on the short end of the stick.
Well, again, every system becomes corrupt and has problems, but obviously unions were needed when they first came in, when people were falling into sausage machines, and you know the Rockefellers and robber barons were selling chalk, fake powdered milk. So those excesses created the unions. People had to fight and die to create the unions. I think the problem with the unions now is that you alluded to. They become so political that a lot of them push for NAFTA and GATT and all this. So it's like they don't even exist anyways. And so then a lot of people see the unions basically as just siding with big corrupt government that's siding with big corrupt corporations. It's like no matter what you do, these insider manipulators, kind of the crony capitalist model, they get in and corrupt anything. And I don't know how you deal with it. I think you get the public aware, you get them involved, and you get them angry. And that transparency is the answer, and people being involved. And, you know, we've talked about getting people involved to realize you're uninvolved at your own peril. I want to give the...
I can only barge in and say that when I was a young man and hoping to be an actor, I took a job at the Buick Oldsmobile Pontiac plant in Kansas City. That was really my first exposure, big time, to the real world. That was an open shop plant. And we were working overtime, forced to work overtime, and you were punished if you didn't. It was a slave ship, is what it turned out to be. So when I finally quit there and went back to Chicago and tried to be more of an actor, and I still had to get jobs, and I said I'd never work in an auto plant again. And finally, seeing my friends working for $1.90 an hour, which was impossible, I went and got a job at the Ford plant there. And that Ford plant paid $1.90 an hour, and that was big time. So I said, okay. And I worked as a metal finisher there. And I worked there for about 9 months. And I want to say that the difference between that closed shop plant, that union shop, as opposed to the open shop that I worked in, was the difference between night and day, and that's where I became a union man. Because I was treated like a human being, and I was treated like a respectable worker, which I was never treated at the Buick plant. So I became a union man, and I've been so ever since. The difference between working union and doing an honest day's work and working non-union, and I would point out the fact to you that every time a non-union man works, the wages he's getting are there because a union shop established a level that he can work under. If there was no union, he'd be working at slave wages himself without that creation of a higher wage scale.
Let me make this point. Look at China, which they call communist. It's not communist. It's a top-down elitist insider group, and they've got people committing suicide in mass at these iPod and iPhone plants and the rest of it. They're made to work, in some cases, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week when they've got big orders in. There's blood all over the textiles now from little kids' fingers. They had to put suicide nets all around it so that Apple and others that say they're liberal can make bigger profits, and they will kill you in China if you try to unionize. And that's just people getting together saying we need to live. And folks, you can pull this up. In China, the main daycares are people chain their children to the light poles or to grates, and then they work all day and try to get out by dark to bring their child food and then go back and live in their hovel. And globalism isn't even lifting up the average Chinese. For the elites it is, and the small middle class that manages them. But it's just creating, I mean, that's where we're going. When you don't demand standards and you don't demand that people be paid enough to live decently, you just destroy the society. And you look at Mexico, where they used Agenda 21 to force people off their rural land the last 20 years up to Mexico City as a staging ground up to the maquiladoras and the borders. It didn't build them up. It forced them off their land where they could sustain themselves and live happily. And they forced them up to Mexico City that's gone from 10 million to 30+ million. And half the population lives in cardboard boxes. I mean, it is. I don't know what we do, because I want America to know. It is the giant sucking sound. We are going to become that now. My problem, Ed, is how do you stop the unions from getting bought off by the big corporations and politicians? I mean, you do agree that, I mean, the big unions have totally sold their people out.
A lot of them have. I will grant you, but I would say that you will always. There was a wonderful publication I used to subscribe to. I don't get it anymore. I don't know what happened to it. Herman Benson was the creator of it, called Union Democracy in Action. And they would cover all of the stories of rebel unions, of unions trying to achieve the voices of their masses and fighting against corrupt leadership. Now, hopefully, union democracy still exists. There are big unions that certainly, I think, are democratic. I know some of those leaders and have met them. I worked with Bill Wimpesinger of the Machinists when he was president, and that was one of the greatest fighting Democrats you ever saw. They do exist out there, and I can't blow the whistle on who isn't and who is, but the Teamsters for years became recognized as the gangster union. Well, I think they've done a lot since then,
sure,
to achieve a cleaner image than they.
Sure. Anything's going to have problems. My point is that once you have globalism and we have no tariffs, and these other countries have hidden ones built in, it doesn't matter. The unions, all of it's just going to go down the drain because it's an unfair playing field. Once you're competing with China, India, Mexico, where people will chain their kids up and go work 18 hours a day, literally till their fingers bleed, once you're competing against that, I mean, it's competing against slavery. And so until we put tariffs up, and of course they're going to do it once we collapse, then they'll blame the tariffs for the collapse. There's nothing, you see where I'm going with that, Ed?
I do. The problem for me exists that we live or have lived in a very comfy society. A comfy society that put its tradesmen to work, that put its steel workers, its auto workers to work, and were then able to sell to the world, and our workers could live a nice middle-class living. We were living beyond the standards of the rest of the world.
Yes.
Now, if you start talking about granting the rest of the world the ability to earn a decent wage, you'll start taking away those jobs from here so that we can provide the rest of the world, and we can start importing. Well, we're now importing all over the place. As I said earlier, look at your clothing labels. All over the world, we're getting this material in. But what are you doing for the Americans here? Where are the jobs that you can put them? Where's the education, which sucks in terms of comparison to the rest of the world? Where's the education that can uplift your worker to qualify for those better jobs if he's not going to be a tradesman? If he's not going to be
sure.
in the factory.
Well, we know what. They're going to be bureaucrats, they're going to be police, they're going to be prison guards. They're shifting the economy from even a service to now a surveillance police state with 30,000 drones. That's the new economy. The new economy is kind of a nightmare empire where you've got to serve the empire and join the military and or work in defense or work in prisons because that's all there's going to be, Ed. That's the plan. That's what the Rand Corporation said they were going to do.
Yeah. Well, I think we're there. You go to the airport, you'll see a lot of formerly employed workers groping you and checking out your luggage. The point is, we've got to cry a halt to it. We've got to create jobs in this country.
Well, by the way, you're right. This is pure social engineering towards the police state. I've talked to the TSA. There's three different types of people. There's either people that had other jobs they lost and they need the money and they don't like it and they apologize to me and say, look, I know this. Then you've got those that are kind of oblivious and just don't care. Then you got the folks that enjoy abusing people, and they're always the boss. The little guys the little ladies are always nice. Yeah. And when you say no to it, then they call over the thug.
We've become a nation of waiters, of cab drivers, of telephone repairmen, of TV repairmen, of salesmen if you can get a job selling someplace. We've become a nation of law enforcement, of nurses, and you go to any hospital, and the vast majority of nurses are from the Philippines. So where are we providing jobs?
You know, we look and act just like Rome before it collapsed, Ed.
Yeah, except where are the circuses? I want some circus. For God's sake. I guess that's what you call me. I'm a circus performer. No,
you're not. You know, I forgot to even give the number out. We're going to come back and take one or two quick questions for Ed Asner while he's here. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231. I forgot to give the number out, but specific quick question for Ed Asner, kind of a grab bag, wild card straight ahead, 800-259-9231. Ed, you know, whether people love you or hate you, I know you're a real guy who does care about humanity. You have tremendous courage. You never even really talk about this, but your show was doing very well on TV. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they cancel it basically because of your political statements?
I think so. I think they will deny it. They will fight that they were worried about the future and therefore canceled it. But it was a viable, very, very full of present-day conflict and ideas, and they can't.
Yeah, they don't want serious issues one way or the other. They want to dumb it all down, and that's what they've done, and it's social engineering, plain and simple. Ed Asner, former head of the Screen Actors Guild, hundreds of films, TV shows, you name it, and he knew Ted Knight. That's a biggie right there. We'll be right back with your calls. All right, we've only got about 5-6 minutes left with Ed Asner, and the phone system, of course, loaded up for him. So I want to jam some of those calls in right now. I should add that Ed's on the road doing a, quote, FDR show type play. I know it sells out around the country. You can just Google show guide for Ed Asner, FDR, and it pops up all over the place if you want to find out more. He's coming to Texas. I might go see him. I went in Texarkana in April. Let's go to Wayne in Tennessee, and then Daryl. Wayne, what's your question for Ed Asner?
It's really not a question. It's a comment. It's a little short-sighted to discount the American spirit and the human spirit. I believe a properly functioning free enterprise system will create enough industry to revive our economy if we just get the D.C. criminals and the New York criminals off our back. And I want to call to action 1 million patriots, educate 300 people in the next 12 months.
If people did that, it would work. But again, we're getting into debates here about systems. We don't have a free market system because it's all rigged and they have tariffs. That's what I keep explaining, is that it's rigged and by the insiders. Ed, what would happen if people all tried to wake up somebody every day? I mean, clearly, folks didn't used to know what false flag was. You pointed out more people do today. What do you think of that solution?
It's great, but then how many are going to quit once they find the other guy coming up with a salient point? I'll give you a very good example. I argued with a friend today about 9/11, and he cited the popular mechanics rebuttal on the idea of conspiracy on 9/11. I didn't read the 9/11 popular mechanics.
It's pure bull.
Was it?
Well, what they do is they build straw men. They take things that aren't true about 9/11 that no one ever said, and then they debunk that. And they lie. They say NORAD never intercepted one plane in 50 years except Payne Stewart. And then I have the very same person, NORAD spokesman, they quote in a Reuters article saying 167 intercepts that year. I mean, it's just total deception.
Well, he posed the question, well, if 9/11, if the towers were brought down, why weren't there explosive material besides the thermite and the sulfur? Why weren't there evidence of explosives being used?
But there was. You see the blast squib points. You can see them saying we're going to bring down 7, and then they blow it up. I mean,
the 7, I totally agree, because you got Larry Silverstein saying we've got to pull the building.
I talked to the head of emergency management, another person who died 2 weeks after we had him on, And he said they were there, and they said there were bombs in the building, the deputy head. Thank you, Wayne. Let's go to Daryl in Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Ed Asner. Quick question.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to talking about the unions. I'm a former electrical union member, IBEW. Basically, what I was seeing with the unions was a microcosm of what our government is like. It became so corrupt, and they, the way they forced you, who you had forced upon you who you had to vote for. What's your comments on that?
I will be the last person to deny that there has been union corruption. IBEW, I'm sure, had its share. It's an evil that you have to be on the watch for and try to fight against.
I think it happens because Americans have gotten so sheep-like, no matter what it is or what system, it's going to become corrupt until we start getting involved, getting informed, and demanding our rights and liberties. Thank you so much, sir, for that point.
As Alex pointed out, would you rather not have unions? What are you going to have without unions? Because they at least are the last gap between total...
Ed, stay there. Got a break. Well, hold on one second. You got cut off by the break, Ed, so we held you over to finish your point.
Well, my point to your last caller is that, yeah, I'm sure that he found corruption with the IBEW, and it may have been just that particular branch or local that he was identified with. I won't say that, that the National Union is corrupt as well. So that I can only say to the members, what are you going to do without a union? If you don't have a union, you're going to be getting certainly less than whatever you're making with the union. And as far as corruption within union, you've got to keep fighting and sacrificing yourself to make it more democratic. It's a...
How do you deal with it if a Mexican truck driver will drive for $7 an hour, which nobody can live on here, and American truck drivers that were getting $30 an hour and could live pretty good are now getting cut down to, $12, $15 an hour, and all the fines and fees? I mean, how does the union idea, because I get, truck drivers being paid more, for example, or, because they need to be able to live and then buy things. That's what makes an economy. Rising tide does raise all ships. How do you deal within Mexican truck drivers out of Mexico?
Well, you're supposed to deal with it nationally. There should be. I mean, once again, it's another example of fair trade. They're allowing these things to come in, and you're denying your American worker this way. And I think that it's a failing nationally by the president, by the Congress, to allow this to happen. And I don't see any reason why it should happen, unless you want to take care of your Mexican neighbor. And I feel that's going on anyway, because the illegals are here. They're taking jobs that citizens don't want or won't take. And
they're sending the money to Mexico. Oh, absolutely. And all I know is this country that was so wealthy is falling apart, and there's so many working poor in this country, and it's just getting worse by the minute. And again, Ed Asner, as FDR, you're doing a theater all over the country. Very interesting. I'm going to try to come and see that since you invited me off air there in Texarkana in April.
I'll give you a complimentary ticket.
Oh, well, that's nice of you. Well, I may have to come out there because I got some family near there that's always saying I never come and see them, so maybe I need to take a trip over there.
Let me hear from you.
Well, I know my father-in-law is a big Ed Asner fan as well, and so maybe I'll bring him along. Well, Ed, thank you so much for coming on with us. We appreciate your courage on 9/11 Truth and speaking out against this World War III they're trying to start. Thank you so much, sir.
We got to watch out.
All right, folks, there goes Ed Asner. We're going to go to break, and we're going to come back and get into incredible news. And again, I know the elites don't want unions, but then I don't like what I see the unions doing politically. I know everything Bill Gates is doing is trying to shut down unions. But then my experiences with unions have not been too nice. Just trying to do things in the media. You go rent a theater, and you find out a union runs it, and they don't even want you to be able to videotape your speech. Well, nobody told me that, So the rules can get really bureaucratic. I mean, again, it's checks and balances, and we don't have those. We're just at the mercy of the globalists. People that are worried about unions. What about China? That's driving down your wage.